Hi, welcome to the very first episode of launching of my podcast, Death Talker Unscripted. The topic is truly in the title, no surprises. I'm your host, Paula, and I'm a death walker, or in today's news, a death doula. By the way, a death doula is someone who is in service, normally a woman. I'm going to speak about death. Very clear, very simple. My podcast is centered on the United States, but I will be referencing other countries in upcoming episodes. This podcast will take on all aspects and ideologies, taboos, around our mindset on how we interact with death, how we conform to certain cultural thoughts, religious thoughts, how we plan for our death, or in this matter, don't plan for our death. And so these are just a few things I'll be touching on. I will be raw, blunt, and quite unorthodox. I don't hold any religious preference here. I don't have any hard scientific facts, but I do have experience and I do have some wisdom that has been passed down for me from all angles of so many open minds. And that includes people from the science world, that includes people from the spiritual world, that includes the matriarchs that I grew up with. And so for me, it's an all-around unorthodox. I speak my mind. I speak what I feel and what I have experienced through being around death. And I also have ideas and concepts that I believe should be part of the whole death movement. I currently hold death talks in my community, hence Death Talker Unscripted. I started back a little bit after COVID. And like I said, I hold them in my community, usually at my senior center. And I wanted to just say that when I first started them, I really wasn't expecting anything. And it came to pass that time after time after time, it was packed and standing room only. And there were all kinds of people from all kinds of lives. I was very honored, and it just really gave me a huge sense of this is a calling. This is the time and the space and the place and the energy to start to make all this death talk be a common everyday deal. My goal is to speak death just as easily over a dinner table as you would a birth. And lucky you guys, I'm bringing this all to the airwaves now. So you don't have to come to my little community center and be a part of the death talks. But if you do have any in your area, I do highly suggest you check one out. So before I dig in this is the opportunity to change the channel. If this isn't your bag of bones kind of deal. Yeah, I went there, I know. But my brain works like that. Most of this is freestyle from the heart and wisdom, from experience or wonderful teachings from my grams, my mom, some outstanding women in Estonia who taught me to be my authentic self. And I also want to mention to all the death doulas that are rising, it is just a beautiful, beautiful thing to see. And I'm ever so grateful to see that. As for me, I was and still am very drawn to death. It started when I was a kid. I could kind of feel and sense when sickness and death were close. It never really scared me. It just made me wonder why it was me, why this was happening, how was it happening, what was making it happening. So it was just a lot of questions. It was more curiosity than fear. As a kid, though, you get called and labeled a bunch of things like weirdo, grim reaper, vague, scary, my favorite angel of death. But it was life. My moms and grams were the matriarchs, and they were most prevalent in my world growing up. My grams was a holistic medicine healer She catered mostly to a small community in our area. She read tarot cards the old-fashioned way with just a deck of cards. I remember that. And she was a very, very wise woman, very, very straightforward, to the point, logical, practical. She didn't dilly-dabble in a bunch of hearsay or stuff. She just said what it was, and that was it. My mom, she was the epitome of Mother Earth. She had such a connection with the earth. Her gardens were magical. She could grow anything out of nothing. The birds, the bees, the turtles, the little animals and creatures, they were drawn to her like Mother Nature. And so I always had that kind of not normal upbringing. And the garden for us was her way of teaching. And by us, there were 8 kids in the family, plus my mom and dad. So the garden was a way of teaching. It was a tool for us kids. We were taught about life and death. We were taught that they were partners, that they only existed because of the other. Life couldn't be life without death, and death couldn't be death without life. We were also taught that the moment you took your first breath, your death clock started. It was this way with every living thing. Breath, clock ticking. We were taught that the seasons too, each one were tied to birth, to full-blown living and harvesting. And then you had dying seasons or rejuvenating seasons, or seasons that went back to be rebirthed or reused in some sort of way. And this carried out through everything. It just wasn't plants, and it was every organism. We were just taught that it's just a cycle, a circle, that where one starts and the other one's riding along, backseat driver, and then bam, it just takes over. There wasn't a need to sugarcoat death during my growing up. Fear never really took center stage with any of us. It was just, okay, it happens. Back to me a little bit. I could just sense and feel the puppies from the litter that wouldn't survive. The animals on the ranch in a very similar fashion. When the horses became sick, I could feel and sense the areas that were diseased, mostly through my hands, or to this day, I'm 60 years old and I still can't explain it on any logical or spiritual or empathic or any word. There's just not a word that has been developed. And I also believe too that there isn't enough knowledge or wisdom yet to explain exactly what's going on with me and other people who claim to have whatever you call sixth senses or whatever it is. Again, I don't believe there's a word yet, and I don't believe there's a full definition for me to give you, because I just don't think it's been found out yet. I was called or named a death walker by my moms and grams, as they explained it. This is because I had a huge need or desire or calling to stay with each one of those animals and kind of walking with them to the end of their life. And with the horses, literally, we did pretty much walk until they just laid down and died. I was talking earlier about my hands always could find the area, or I could sense whether it's he. Again, no words for it. And I knew all the stages of the dying process, so I would talk each one through it. I was sitting with the horse, or I was sitting with the puppy, and I would talk them through what was actually taking place in their body, and that was okay. Their energy, was getting ready to be released. And it was just very important for me to walk them all the way up until the point where they could no longer hear me. It always is what it is, and it always works out to be as it should be. That's just something that I feel. And I strongly have seen it over and over and over again. So that's just kind of how I perceive it. The one question I get quite often is, what happens when you die? I always pause and, I kind of got to giggle and just kind of shake my head a little bit, because I don't know. I don't know what happens when we die. I'm a death walker. I'm not an angel of death. I am not a seer of lost ones. I was not blessed with that kind of energy. My energy is from the time that they become ill, and it is probably the most detrimental time, when everything is ill and shutting down and breaking down. And I walk them to the veil, the line, the point of no return. There's a million words for it. For me, I walk with them until they are no longer here to hear me, feel me, see me. The bioorganic machine has shut down. That's the end of what, I'm graced with. There's colors of spectrum, and the body turning heat, and so that's kind of the state of time and space that I work in. It also works very well when I speak with the families there, or certain friends are there. A lot of times they don't understand what's going on. No one's explained it to them. They've never been around it. So in a lot of ways, I am the caretaker of the group. I'm the information giver if I've got it. If not, I will find someone who can give you the information. I sit closely with the dying entity, whether it's plant, animal, or mammal, or any living thing. And I am able to be with them. And I get a sense of what leaving this time and place is every time that I do it. And I'm sure they take something of whatever my energy is, whatever my vibration, it is an imprint on that situation. The one thing I do know is that no two deaths are alike. Death's own versions of, like the snowflake. They are all perfect deaths, because that's what death in the end is. Death is perfect because you're no longer here and there's no pain, no anything. So it is quite unique. It's also unique in the fact that, like I said, no two deaths are alike. No one will breathe their last breath the same way. No one will speak the last words the same way. They may have some of the same thoughts, but it's uniquely, when they speak it, it is uniquely bound and tied to their lives, their people. I do that no people walk into the same space in exactly the same way. And when I say that, I have never sat with two puppies or more puppies that ever went the same way, that I walked the same way with. Every walk is different in micro, minimalist ways that only I can feel. And occasionally there are a few macro moments that I do feel. I do know that no two heavens or hells, as it's labeled, will be exactly the same. the last words that I've spoken, or the last few moments that I'm with someone, or hours for that matter, I have come to realize that there are 7 billion plus people on this planet, and everyone has a different view of what their heaven or hell or spiritual oneness, whatever that afterlife promotes. Very few, even if they say I'm going to heaven, if you ask them to describe their heaven, it will be succinctly in conjunct with what they have attained in this lifetime. So again, not identical in any ways. Someone asked me about caregiving and stuff like that. And it's not no much as a caregiver as it is a caretaker. I have to take great care in taking not only the dying person on the journey and me being a full-blooded living person, but there is what the dying person brings to the table as well. And that's the dying person stuff. And maybe the caregiver, the wife or the family member, best friend, loved one, and anything else that rolls in. And so for me, it's very weird that it's not really a caregiver deal. It's more taking great care to make sure that this person dies on their terms, dies their way. That's my key motive, is you are the dying person. You have, for whatever time you have been here on this place and in this time frame, you have made decisions and you have led your life and you have all this stuff to show for it. So why is it that your death cannot be an extension of that? And you should be able to die. If you made all these decisions in life and you are capable of making a decision, you should die your way, on your terms. And that's my key role as a death doula. The other thing is, I do know that no two bodies cross over. They don't die in the same way. Everybody's bioorganic machine breaks down and dies in its own way. There is a pattern that they all follow, and that pattern is very vivid to me. I can visually see it and feel it and taste it and all that stuff that you could think of. But again, I only walk them up until they're dead. I have no answers for what happens other than I know they're dead and they no longer exist in this particular time period. Well, I've just about gone through everything that I can possibly think of that I would like to introduce to this first episode. And it was my opening episode, and it really was quite a ordeal for me to sit down and do this, but it was a lot, I know, for me, so I know it's going to be a lot for you guys. Thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. This is a big subject with so many subcategories. So it's okay if it's overwhelming, and take the time to process, because I know I'm going to process, and I'm sure there will be some changes when I come back and listen. Each episode will be an open freestyle, like I said earlier, thinking of my take on death. And I'm going to share my heroes and people that I admire and just stuff like that. The mission of this podcast, just like the mission of my being a death walker, is to change the way we as a collective handle death, to make some waves, to churn some new thoughts, build some new concepts, and to break the old one-size-fits-all medieval barbaric way we choose to not only see and teach death, but perform death. And I get tired of people telling me and assuming that it should be all about suffering and shoved in some dark corner somewhere till they die. And then all of a sudden it's a big celebration. So this is where kind of the rubber meets the road for me. And again, I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening. And I hope that you'll join me along this journey. It's been fascinating for me over the past 3 years of really jumping into the whole death culture here. COVID was a big, big wake-up call, and I'd like to bring forth what I have seen, what I felt, what I'm currently going through with all my clients and even people who call me on a regular basis. It's a really big subject, and my goal, like I said, is to just get everybody to open their minds a little bit, and let's see if we can offer some other options that many other countries already have in place. And if we can just be a little bit kinder and a little bit more compassionate when it comes to how we choose to have our people die. And again, want to close it out. Blessed be. Thanks everybody for hanging out, and be well.